So welcome everyone. My name's Amy Seeary. I am the telehealth nurse here at Cerebral Palsy Support Network. I'd like to start in acknowledgement in the spirit of reconciliation. The Cerebral Palsy Support Network acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. I join this meeting from Boonwurrung land, and Thea joins us from Bundjalung country. Thanks so much everyone for coming along. We're really excited to be hosting this webinar with Thea and so grateful that she can give us her time. Before I get into that, so as many of you know, I'm the telehealth nurse for the Cerebral Palsy Support Network. A bit about us if you don't know about us. It started over 20 years ago by a group of parents with cerebral palsy who didn't feel like they had access to the support or community that they needed. Since then, we've evolved into a comprehensive disability service provider. We're NDIS registered and can provide support work and support coordination. We have a fantastic free member services program that anyone can join, and by being a member, you gain access to things like support groups, both online and on Facebook, social activities, classes, events, and myself, the telehealth nurse. After today's webinar, we'll send some more information about our services, and if you're not already a member, please consider joining up. So just a couple of housekeeping. If you're, could please keep on mute throughout the webinar, and we'll have time for questions at the end. You can certainly please put questions in the chat as you go, and we'll answer those in the end. Or if in question time you would like to actually speak on camera, please raise your hand and you can answer. I think that was the main thing for housekeeping. So I would like to introduce our lovely speaker, Thea. So Thea, for the past 27 years, Thea has had a variety of clinical and management positions in the counselling and disability fields in Australia. She's also spent 8 years teaching counselling and assisting to establish counselling processes, structures and resources in Cambodia, Fiji, Tuvalu, Papua New Guinea and Samoa. Thea was born with cerebral palsy, thus has lived experience of disability and navigating herself through a predominantly able-bodied culture. Thea currently has her own counselling practice in Ballina, New South Wales, with a focus on disability and mental health and a passion to promote authentic inclusion. So lucky to have you today, Thea. Thank you so much. I'll hand over to you.
Great. Well, welcome everybody, and lovely to kind of see some of your faces. Amy just did a bit of an introduction about me. So I'm a counsellor at heart, and I've been a counsellor for 27 years. A great pathway, a great career pathway. I've been able to understand myself a lot more, but also the sacredness of being with other people as they share their pain and share things with me that maybe they've never told anybody in their life. And, you know, that's the absolute honour of being a counsellor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a bit of a PowerPoint. I'm going to just talk a little bit about what I do in regard to my practice. And then I'm going to be doing just a little bit of a presentation kind of generally on mental health and kind of specifically around cerebral palsy, although this could relate to a lot of other disabilities as well. I want to make sure that I leave time for questions and answers, because that's often where a lot of the great discussions happen as well. So without further ado, I'm going to just share my screen with you now with a PowerPoint that I prepared. So as I said, you know, I am sort of targeting this around mental health and cerebral palsy. My reasons being, I'm pretty passionate about this area. A little bit, you know, you've heard that I've been a counsellor for 27 years, and, you know, I've gone overseas and I've taught counselling. It's been great. I got back from my Samoan gig in November, December, and my body was really hurting, really hurting. And I was really felt like I just couldn't move. And partially that was because I basically have ignored my body. I've done a little bit of exercise, but you know, I put cerebral palsy on the back burner a lot. There's a lot of reasons I've done that, and partially that's because of some mental health reasons, you know, like just keep cerebral palsy there so that I can try and be part of the able-bodied world. And I realized, you know, I really got a big kick about, we really need to have, I need to look at mental health and cerebral palsy, and I'd really like to make that a sort of a focus of my counselling practice, because there's just not enough around, I think, on promoting the actual issues that people with cerebral palsy particularly, and the people with disabilities face, as well as their mental health issues. So a little bit about my counselling service. So I'm a sort of a mainstream counsellor, but I'm also a family and relationship counsellor as well. So that means I can do individual counselling. I've counselled children, I've counselled adolescents, I've counselled families, I've counselled couples. I've also created some small group counselling programs that include for parents of newly diagnosed children with a disability, navigating the early school years for parents predominantly as well, and also being parent of a teen with a disability. And I've also got programs that are teens with disabilities and adults with disabilities. I've sort of formed these 6-week group counselling programs. The reason why I've done that is because over the years, I've really noted that when people are together and sharing their experiences, one, there is great wisdom in the group, but two, there's a strong connection that forms because you just realize, hey, I'm not alone. Other people also have this same sort of feeling. So I've created these that can be online, because I'm based up in Ballina in New South Wales, but these groups can also be online as well as face-to-face. I might repeat this at the end, but, you know, people might want to go, well, you know, I want to know a little bit more about you after we finish this webinar. So last night I was being a little bit of a website sort of builder, which I was tearing my hair out, but I got there in the end. So I've actually created on my website, this is my website, Thea Keane Counselling. So if you actually wanted to have a chat with me, like just a free little chat where we can just talk about what counselling is and a bit more about the group programs if needed, all you'd have to do is when you come on here onto my website, when you press the book online, this comes up and here's a complimentary meet and greet. So, you know, that's just a complimentary, just a free little chat where even if you have some extra questions after this webinar that you really like to have a chat about, you could just book one of these complimentary meet and greets, and then it would just give you this. And so you just find a time that was good for you, and we could go from there and meet each other online if you have some questions after this webinar. Right, okay, so I'm just going to now just do a brief discussion or a brief presentation on broadly the mental health issues and cerebral palsy. So it's going in 3 different ways. First of all, I'm just going to be looking at the causes, the reasons why mental health is so prevalent, particularly with people with cerebral palsy and with disabilities. Also then the assistance, what sort of things can be of help when we are going through mental health issues. And also, I'll end it off with the supports that are out there, should we need them. And particularly sometimes when we're talking about this subject matter, things come up for you personally. So we'll just make sure that you have those support networks toward the end of this presentation. So what do we know about mental health and cerebral palsy? So this is very small captioned here, but these little four dialogue boxes here. The first one's saying mental health concerns are underrepresented areas of study. So we really don't know how prevalent mental health concerns are for people with cerebral palsy. So what we do know is that it's understudied. And you can kind of get that for anyone here that has cerebral palsy. You know that when you were a child, there's a lot of focus on early intervention, as there should be. And sometimes the mental health or the anxiety and depression and other things that are happening get a bit overshadowed by all the doing therapies, because they're so important, obviously, when we're children and little and our bodies are growing. It is recognised that there is a higher risk for mental health for the CP population across the lifespan, but it is underdiagnosed and undertreated. And this is really interesting, because if I think back to my own practices, I've had various practices and various formats over the years. And I can probably count on one hand when I actually had a person with cerebral palsy or someone with a significant disability in front of me. And I wondered, why is that so? How come people aren't accessing mental health services when they need them? Just a bit of a question mark there. 46% of children with CP have mentioned experiencing symptoms of anxiety. Additionally, nearly 70% continually demonstrate behaviours that get in the way of their daily lives, causing further frustration. So they're pretty high figures, really. 50% of children who have been diagnosed with cerebral palsy have at least one mental health disorder. So we know then that it is a high statistically that if we have cerebral palsy or a disability, we're much more prone to having a mental health condition. Why? Why is this so? Well, there are a number of reasons, and there's probably much more here than I have listed, but I will go through these number of reasons. First of all is the initial brain injury. So we know with cerebral palsy that we have a brain injury. Now, that brain injury is obviously causing issues to our mobility, but it can also impact our problem-solving skills. So if we haven't got honed in problem-solving skills, we can get really stressed when there's a problem, because we can't logically sit down and think of the sequential order of how we're going to solve that problem, because that part of our brain has been impacted. That's one reason. A big reason, chronic pain and pain medication. So a lot of people with cerebral palsy at different stages of their life may experience chronic pain. For some people, that is just a lifetime condition. For others, it ebbs and flows depending on, the mobility and independence issues that people have at that particular time. We know that if you're in chronic pain affects your mental health. It just does. If you're waking up every day and you're in pain and you feel painful, then it's going to get you down, because you want to have a day where you wake up and go, whoo, I'm not in pain today. I feel good, and it lifts your spirits. So we know that that is a cause of depression and anxiety. Of course, with chronic pain comes disrupted sleep. So if you're not really comfortable at nighttime, your body's going to wake up a lot. And if it wakes up a lot, it then gets into the habit of waking up a lot. So if you have a really good night's sleep and you're feeling really comfortable, sometimes we get into the habit of waking up anyway. We call that insomnia. And then we have disrupted sleep. And when we have disrupted sleep, we're feeling groggy when we wake up the next day. We don't have as much enthusiasm for the day. And then that can really play on our depression and anxiety. Nutritional health. We know body, mind, and spirit. So we know that our body, our mind, and our spirit are all sort of connected. And so what we put into our mouth and what we eat is going to affect to the way that we feel about ourselves. So keeping a really healthy diet is really going to help to maintain healthy mental health. This one, I can really relate to this one. Fatigue. It is 3 to 5 times more effort for people with cerebral palsy to do anything. So, it really, you kind of get used to it, as we know. Anyone with cerebral palsy knows that it's just a way of life, and I do this. However, when you really think about that it takes me 3 to 5 times more effort to do anything, to physically do anything, it's going to, at times, really bring me down, because I want to just be able to do things effortlessly, like I see other people do. Sometimes when we don't aren't able to move our bodies or move our bodies in the way that we want to, we then have less physical activity. So what we know when we exercise, endorphins come and they get fired off from the brain. When endorphins get fired off from the brain, then we feel really good. So if you've ever exerted yourself and you have just finished exerting yourself through exercise and you're on a high because those endorphins have been transmitted from your brain. And so if we are having less physical activity, then we're not getting those endorphins. Limitations in daily life. So people with cerebral palsy, when they are comparing themselves to able-bodied community, will see that there are a number of limitations in daily life. For some people, these might be minuscule or things that they get around. For other people, it's really full on. And things that are taken for granted in an able-bodied world are just not available. And so the feeling of hopelessness. Again, some days it may not affect, but other days it may be like, why can't I just do this for myself? And that can come over us in waves and can stay with us in the form of depression and anxiety. Challenging behaviours and how these are met. So sometimes, particularly when we're feeling depressed and we're feeling anxious, that we can exhibit that through challenging behaviours. You know, one of those is just getting really irate and really angry and really frustrated just because I want things to be different. And then how these are met by the people around us. So some people are able to be with strong emotions really well, and they're able to acknowledge your strong emotions really well and able to, just to talk with you and let you express those emotions. But a lot of people are not really comfortable with strong emotions, and they sometimes slam you down or tell you to be different, or just react to the behavior that they're seeing rather than the feelings that are underneath that behavior. Limited opportunities for socialization, a huge one. It's a huge one. So not being able to go and do everything and socialize in a way that, again, if I go back to able-bodied people, can do quite easily. And so when you are limited in your socialization, you are isolated and you feel isolated. When we feel isolated, depression's just around the corner. So you've got connection to others, connection to my world, connection to everything around me. I normally feel pretty happy and content when I'm in a connected place. When I'm isolated, I can feel disconnected. And disconnection is one of the symptoms and signs of depression, that I'm disconnected from others, I'm disconnected from myself, and I'm disconnected from life. Restricted and inauthentic interactions with peers and adults. So one, again, the restricted interactions, because maybe I just can't get out by myself and make decisions about who I want to be around. And then also the inauthentic interactions. I could do a whole session on ableist comments, let me tell you. I've been amongst them all my life. And so when we have inauthentic interactions, those people who are uncomfortable with disability or uncomfortable just because somebody may be a little bit different to them, suddenly you're needing to take on their uncomfortability and make it okay for them. So I call that inauthentic interactions. People either, feeling sorry or saying things or talking at a higher pitch or doing something where you know that they are interacting not as authentic as they could be. Discrimination and injustices, we'd like to say, and in all the organizations I work for, we always talk about inclusion, and we talk about non-discriminatory practices. I teach it in counselling. I teach it to say, you need to be non-discriminatory and we include everybody. And that is great. and we live in that sort of world now that really promotes that. But there's also the discrimination and injustices that still occur despite that. And even though sometimes things look good on paper and have tick boxes, but in real life, there is still discrimination and there's still injustices that occur on a daily basis, particularly around inclusion and what is authentic inclusion. So these things too, discrimination and injustices, when you're up against them, look, if you're up against them once or twice, you may not get very down, but when you're up against them on a daily basis or a weekly basis, it can really get you down. Barriers to education. So I may have a barrier to being able to get educated because of my disability. And I'd also say a bit about that of how people might perceive me and my intelligence levels based on how my body is and how I am interacting. And people could make assumptions based on that, which then of course, again, is inauthentic and can be a barrier to at least education, if not other things. Barriers to employment. Here we go again. So again, in all the organizations I've worked for, they often say we encourage people with disabilities to apply for these jobs, which is great. And there's a lot of success stories, not saying there's not, but I also know that some people would not go and make modifications and adjustments, but they would say that someone else was better than you if you went for the job. So there can be sometimes barriers to employment. Social exclusion. And this could just be because I can't literally get out by myself and go to social occasions that I would choose to go to, but also can be just that people forget you, or they forget, or it's a little bit too hard. I'm always feeling a little bit on edge or a bit uncomfortable around you. So, I don't invite you to all these places. So again, we may feel the social exclusion. Social exclusion and again, isolation, recipes for depression. Unhealthy family dynamics. So I'm not going to get into those too much because I see the time. But there's a lot of unhealthy family dynamics that do impact on us. Most of us who are adults can probably think of a few unhealthy family dynamics or a few unhealthy things that happened to us as children. And when these things happen, they cause trauma. Trauma is our response to things that have happened in our lives. And trauma can sometimes take the driver's seat and can impact on our everyday, what we do every day in our behaviors. Masking pain and self, bullying, poor sense of self. Again, those three are big. They're huge and big. But if I really go on about them, I won't get through the end and we won't get to our questions. But all of those things are reasons why. So family dynamics, stress on the parents trickles down to the children. Overprotection, overcompensation, promoting the victim, overpraising. Don't know if anyone's ever been overpraised for something that they've done, which is just like, everyone's doing that. Why are you praising me for that? Sibling rivalry, adults' needs before children's needs is a big one, and inability to cope with child's emotional pain. And so I try to act like my child isn't having an emotional pain because I can't handle it. I'm going to just go through these really quickly, what children learn about themselves from their environment and the messages they receive. This is just a little bit about, when I have a lot of adults in front of me for counselling, I often go back to the past, usually because the past is it often has the driver's seat until we get a different relationship with our past and we can come a bit more into our adult. I know that doesn't make that much sense now, but I am rushing things a little bit. But what children learn about themselves from their environment and the messages they receive. So children are like sponges soaking up all that is said and done around them. So there's affirming messages that we get from our parents and caregivers, both verbal and non-verbal. and actions that assist a child to develop a healthy self-esteem. So these are examples down here. I really like the way that you shared your dessert with your sister. That was really kind of you. That's acknowledging a child's actions, spending time with a child, prioritizing the child feels like they're very much needed and very much important. Showing interest in what they like, again, shows that a child's important. Getting down on children's level and commenting on what they're doing, being seen by the adults in their life. It's okay, let me do that for you. Now you'll see that that's on the next page too, but that can be a positive if someone's helping you out. Wow, you did really great. I could see how hard that was for you and you just kept trying till you mastered it. How do you feel? So again, that's something that's really asking a child how they feel and acknowledging the journey it took to get to master something. And you can do anything, you're my champion. Again, that can be a really positive affirmation. So again, these are some of the things on this page, on this PowerPoint, where children may learn a negative thing about themselves. It's okay, let me do that for you. So that was on the other page as well as being positive. It can also be negative because therefore then you start this thing up that you need to always be my helper and I'm starting to, there's a dynamic that's happening between us. No more tears now. Where's your happy face? So that's basically saying not okay to show emotions I don't like. You just show me emotions I do like. Preoccupied, not being available to your child's needs. You can do anything. You're my champion. It's on this page as well. Reason being is, this was a little bit for me. I've got a lot of affirmation. Very special. You've got a reason that you've got cerebral palsy. And so then I do start masking my emotional pain because I'm being told to be strong all the time because, you know, that's why you've been given cerebral palsy. Look how good you are. Didn't even notice that anything was wrong. So again, it's basically saying, yay, you're conforming to an ableist world. That's great. Bullying remarks, there's plenty of them. Haven't got time to really go through them, but I'm sure everybody has been knows of bullying remarks that could come your way. When all of these things happen, we learn a negative self-image and we can take that into our adulthood. So we're getting now to what children need what children need from adults in their life when they're feeling depressed or anxious. They need trust that they can be and feel whatever they want. So that means that whatever emotion you have, I'm going to let you have it. And that can be anger, that can be frustration, that can be sadness, that can be pain. And I'm going to acknowledge that before I move on and try to assist you with how we're going to solve a problem. Be a listening ear, help with problem solving, a shelter from the storm, an encourager, a calming influence, and loving and consistent. That's what kids need when they're feeling depressed and when they're feeling anxious from the adults around them. They also, when they're feeling anxious, there are some things that we can do when we're feeling really anxious. We can be doing some breathing exercises, sensory stimulation. So actually touching something that's really soft and really nice actually starts to make us feel a lot less anxious. Slowing ourselves down, looking out and focusing on something on nature, like a flower, a bird, and just really focusing in on that can get our minds to actually get out of anxiety and into the present. Using imagination to create a safe space. So not giving a child power, or an adult power, that anytime they want to, they can go into an imaginary safe space. Rhythm and touch. So rhythm and pressure can sometimes be really good. A calming influence, and love and consistency. What do adults need? Someone to talk to. Now, I'd be out of a job if everyone had a really good empathetic ear and had the ability to listen without judgment and to be able to be person-centered and give the whole of their attention to this person in front of you. Some of you would be lucky to have friends and family who are able to do that. If you are, that is so good. But sometimes also we need to speak to somebody who has those skills so that you are able to talk and discuss about any emotion that you have, and that you will be validated and will be treated with non-judgment when you're exploring those feelings. to understand the reasons for their mental health issues. So adults need to understand, well, why do I feel like this? Just an understanding of what's causing this. Find a way to feel connected. I did mention before about disconnection. Once we feel connected again, we feel less anxious and we feel less depressed. So we need to feel, and that can be different for everybody about how they feel connected again. To be understood, recognized for who they really are, to develop pro-social and assertiveness skills to support themselves. Sometimes medication does help, going to a doctor and talking to them, particularly if you've had mental health issues for a while, and participating in recreational activities of interest to the person. Barriers, why don't we seek this help? So there might not be enough education around mental health. We know that there is kind of Australia-wide around mental health, but maybe not enough education around the support systems that are out there. Ableism comments. So sometimes that just stops you from wanting to go out because of people not really understanding about what you're talking about. Financial. Hopefully NDIS sort of can assist that now, because we know that if you have daily living in your self-managed or your plan managed NDIS, you can seek out counselling in your plan, but it can be a financial burden to a barrier, and that need to remain strong. Like I mentioned before, sometimes we just, we get that message so strongly that we don't know that we can actually break apart a little bit. Oh, so this is some of the phone numbers to keep in mind. Particularly if anything has been raised, I know I went pretty fast in that last bit, but if anything has been raised as I've been talking, that, you've got a number of peak bodies in Australia now, and a number of these numbers that you can call, and you could talk to somebody over the phone. Most of these are 24 hours as well, so it helps because we never know when we're going to be in a low place. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing right now. This, I think, opening it up to questions and answers. Oh, sorry, am I going to answer? So yes. Do I give it over to you, Natalie?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Thea. I feel like I could have listened to you all day. I wish we had more time for you, but we're going to move on to questions now. And we did get a few questions sent to us before we go to the table and let everyone else speak. So the first question is from one of our members. It is, how do we keep ourselves mentally strong if we must isolate ourselves due to illness?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's a big one, and it takes me back to that isolation. Isolation means disconnect. And so when I'm disconnected socially from people and I'm by myself, that can really play on our mental health. Some of the things that I would suggest, first of all, is having a structure, having a daily structure, and giving yourself small rewards during the day. So saying to yourself things like, okay, so I'm going to get up in the morning, I'm going to maybe do stretching exercises, then I'm going to have my breakfast, I'm going to take time to have my cup of tea while I'm watching the birds outside, and that can be the first reward. But actually cutting your day up so that it's quite structured. What happens is when we have time on our hands, our minds go down a pretty bad wormhole. So it can be like, oh my goodness, this is going to be this for the rest of my life. All these things that I'm missing out on. I'm just not connected to anybody. No one cares. It's always going to be like this. So when we feel like that, what happens, when we say those things over and over in our mind, we actually start feeling that. And then we start being that. So sometimes you need to short circuit. You need to find a short circuit. So when you find your mind going into this really dark place, it's time to do something different. Now, that could be talking to someone over the internet. It could be talking to someone on social media. It could be, doing those things, like I said, like, honing in on nature, anything that's going to change and short circuit that brain from going crazy. So there's some of the things that you can do. I'm not saying it's easy either. quite difficult when you're on your own and you're ruminating and you're getting quite negative thoughts. But you're finding ways to structure your day, still trying to reach out to people, and also being aware of those thoughts and trying to put a short circuit to change that around. It's not, there's this thing, it's kind of like a little trick, but it's not a trick, but it's actually a technique that counsellors use. And we call it CBT, which is cognitive behavioural therapy, because basically if you're having negative thoughts, it influences everything in your body and you feel quite down and you feel quite low. And then how you behave is in sync with your low feeling. If you have more positive thoughts, then it actually brings a more positive feeling and it actually changes the way you behave. So sometimes I tell people, you've got to fake it till you make it. So we work out, what is it that makes you like laugh out loud? What is it that you could think of that you just go into fits of laughter about? And then we would, might look at that. Maybe it might be a baby cackling with laughter or whatever it is. And when you look at it, you can't help but laugh yourself. And suddenly you've tricked yourself. You've tricked your brain. Even though you've been feeling low, some of these can be little tricks of the trade.
Thanks so much for that. Another question we got was, how do we deal with feelings of anger and isolation cerebral palsy can create?
Yeah. So anger, think about a iceberg. So if you thought about an iceberg, I've never seen one myself, but we know with an iceberg that we see the top of the iceberg on top of the water. And then what we don't see the rest of the iceberg that's underneath the water. So with anger, everyone sees the iceberg, the anger is the iceberg on top of the water. That's what everyone sees. But underneath are all the feelings that actually trigger the anger. Hopelessness, depression, feelings of, low self-esteem, disappointed, excluded. I could go on and on and on and on. And so all of those feelings are down there and you're unable to express them, but most of us can express anger pretty well. We can be a bit frightened of anger, but anger's there for a reason. Anger is only bad if you hurt yourself or hurt somebody else. Anger is an explosive feeling that needs to be somehow expressed. Now that can just be expressed in moving your body. It can be expressed in, having a pillow next to you and, punching the pillow. It can be expressed in ways that are safe for you. And if you've got somebody in front of you that acknowledges and says, looks like you're really feeling really frustrated right now. So that's what most of us want to hear. Often, if I've said that to an angry person in front of me, they come right down because I'm actually seeing them. I'm seeing them and I'm acknowledging their feeling right now. So having those feelings acknowledged as well. Knowing that anger is okay. As I said, the only time anger is not okay is if we use it, with bad words against another person, we hurt a relationship, or we hurt ourselves or somebody else. It's a feeling that's there just as much as everything else. But if you've got anger, you be aware that you've got a whole sea of emotions underneath there. And anger is being like your protective warrior. It's being like, I'm not going to let them see my depression, my hurt, my disappointment. So I'm going to come over and protect you. That's what anger does. So sometimes we can say, we don't need protecting right now. We can be vulnerable and we can express our emotions. When we do that more often, we're less angry.
We're getting more questions through the chat group now, and I might just read one of them aloud if that's okay. When it comes to romantic relationships with others, I sometimes feel I don't offer enough due to my disability compared to other able-bodied people, and question why would anyone choose me? What would you suggest?
That's a biggie. One that I probably can't answer in 2 minutes. However, it's the biggest. Once we hit puberty, once our bodies hit puberty, we start to become attracted sometimes before our bodies hit puberty, we start to become attracted to other people. That could be people of the opposite sex, it could be people of the same sex, but we do start getting attracted to other people. And also what that means is we want to be attractive to other people. One thing I do know from my years of wisdom and being so old is that everybody, I think, really feels vulnerable in relationships. I think because you're exposing yourself, particularly if you say to somebody, I really like you, or I think I'm falling in love with you, then you're putting yourself in a very vulnerable state. It also then raises how you think about yourself. So if you have a low self-esteem, then you're going to feel really probably quite nervous about being romantically involved with someone else, because you're always going to be thinking about what are they noticing. I did that all the time. It was, are they noticing my limp? Are they noticing my hand? Are they noticing? But the more I did that, the less of me can come out, the less of the real me can come out. So in essence, when we form a relationship with another person, yes, there's all the, I don't know, what do they call them, influencers and stuff now that are all showing us all these amazing bodies and how to be beautiful, whatever. But really, in essence, we fall in love with the person's spirit, the person of who they are, you know, and you don't see, I mean, you might, I mean, relationships are relationships, but, you know, you might obviously see if they're you know, got a nice dress on today or whatever, but you do fall in love with the essence of the person, and that is the qualities that they bring. So bringing out your own qualities as much as possible, being aware of your insecurities and going, yeah, there's a reason that those insecurities are there. You know, I've been told from the get-go, you know, what is socially accepted and what's not socially accepted. And now I'm going to enter into a romantic relationship and I'm supposed to be really confident with myself. No. But being aware of that, and then being aware of what really counts at the end of the day, and what really counts, and what are meaningful relationships. What sort of meaningful relationship do I want in an intimate partner? I could talk all day, but I won't do any more on that.
Well, we're getting so many good questions. We've got a few more that I'm going to go through with you. One from another participant or audience member. What led you to pursue your career path?
Good question.
We've talked about this.
Yeah.
We talked about this in my article, actually. So if people want to get the story, we can put it up. They can access the article.
I left school in year 10. I had I was really intelligent, but I was bullied relentlessly. Oh God, I couldn't wait to leave the Catholic girls' school. You know, to this day, I have big issues with a Catholic girls' school. And so I left. And I went into the bank, and I'm not saying the bank's not a good job. It's fine. And then I went on and I got married very quickly and had 3 children because I hated myself. I despised myself, but I felt that if I became a mum, that I might start liking who I am. So that was my journey till, you know, my late 20s. And then I had a marriage breakup and I started thinking about who I really was. And changing the trajectory of my life. So I was getting help myself through counselling, realising that I had these skills for a lot of years, that I've been doing them just ad hoc in friendships. So I just pursued that. Lots of great opportunities came my way, and I was able to pursue counselling through a counselling agency. And I did it because, you know, what I say now as well, that if I didn't have cerebral palsy, I wouldn't be as good a counsellor as I am, because I've gone to those depths of pain and I can hold someone in their depths of pain. And a counsellor can only hold you as far as they're willing to go themselves. And so they're the times where I go, you know, I wouldn't actually change this life path if you ask me. I don't say that every day, mind you. but you know, in essence, that's you know what it means for me.
We have a really heavy question here, but I'm sure quite a number of our viewers will identify with it. How do you reduce the intensity of your feelings after encountering discrimination in a workplace interview?
Oh man, so hard. Because you at one point you're thinking to yourself, well, I still want to be seen as professional and, you know, in the running for this position. So you're thinking to yourself, so what can I say? What can't I say in regard to being like a troublemaker? I think, you know, really the best way is to take the emotion a bit out of it, because if you were to say something straight away, and sometimes it's apt and sometimes it's appropriate, but if we could, it'll be apt and appropriate if we can say it in a mature, you know, way that we're pointing out something. But if our emotions are there because we've just been feeling attacked or judged, we're probably going to be heightened in our emotions. And so our response is probably going to be more defensive, and it won't be, and the person who's listening to it won't receive that message very well. So for me, and this has happened on a number of occasions, I go away from the situation and then I work out what is the best way to try to make a change and how's the best communication, because I want the person who's receiving the information I'm about to give them, you've been really judgmental and you've been discriminatory. I don't want it to be quite defensive. You see this all the time in politics, defense, and no one listens to each other. Yeah. So what you're wanting to do is have somebody really listen to make profound change so that the next time this happens, well, that it doesn't happen, or that the person's more aware of their actions. So then you have to work out what is the best communication mode. It might be in writing it down instead of saying it out loud. It might be testing it out with family and friends. Like, I want to say this. What do you think about that? Getting feedback so that you can feel that, okay, I can actually do this, say this, and everyone said, yep, that's great. I couldn't say that better myself. You want to do it in such a way that, as I say, the person is able to receive it. But make sure for your own emotions that you get them met, that you find someone that can talk to you after that and will listen to your experience and will validate your experience. Because there's nothing worse than feeling small and feeling like you are less than because of the experience that you have just had in that job interview.
I think that's a really valid point. Having supports in place is really important. Just going to the room now to see if we have any more questions from the audience. Oh, here we have one. How do you find connection with other people outside of your friend group?
So hard. I think as we get older, it gets harder. Obviously when we're younger, we're usually in institutions, whether it be school or otherwise, where we're put together with a group of people and we hopefully find friendships out of that. And then we leave those institutions as adults. And so where do you find like-minded people? And it's a difficult thing. I think first and foremost, you have to say to yourself, what is it that I like doing? And what is the sort of person that I wish to be around? You know, working that out for yourself, first of all. What is it that I like doing? Because if you can find something or something that you actually like doing, you've got enthusiasm for it, you can talk to people about it, and you can listen to them as well. But it's also saying to yourself, what sort of people do I want to have in my world? It can be really hit and miss. It can be so hit and miss because, you know, there's plenty of groups, I suppose, out there, both on the internet and you know, face to face and different things. But you know, finding your tribe is difficult, and your tribe is people that you have around you that are not necessarily all thinking or feeling the same way as you, but people who've got your back. And people that you can rely on at the end of the day. And I think the more that you actually like who you are, genuinely like the person you are, the better chance you've got of bringing that in, attracting that same sort of quality of person in. I know that's pretty abstract because you're probably wanting like A, B, C, D, do this, 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 this. But I don't think there's really too many sort of like, you know, sometimes it is a hit and miss and trying things out. But I know what social anxiety is like too. I don't know if this question about social anxiety, but I've had that, you know, walking into a new environment, hate it. I hate it. I could probably talk to 1,000 people without a problem if I was there on the stage. But if I was walking into that environment, I hate it. I feel like every eye's on me, and I feel like I'm trapped in my body and I can't speak, and people aren't going to see me for who I am. But then the more people I talk to, the more I realize that so many of us have social anxiety. We're so awkward, and we're all trying to make friends with each other without all of our own interests, you know, and our anxieties and our own intricate sort of, you know, ways of being.
I think that's fair enough. And we've just run out of question time. So I'm going to chuck it back to Amy, who's going to provide some resources and a few final notes with you. Thanks, Thea.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Thea. That was so interesting. You know, I think I speak for everyone. You know, we all gained a lot of insight for both, you know, adults and as a parent of children with cerebral palsy. I really got a lot from that, and could ask you questions for all afternoon. But we have run out of time, as Nat did say. But as Thea mentioned earlier in her presentation, she does offer a 30-minute free consultation. So if anyone does have any follow-up questions or thinks, oh, gee, you know, I'd really like to chat to Thea more, please take Thea up on that. Thea's website is in the chat. And we will also be sending out an email with a recording of this and any follow-up resources that we have, and you know, and if it really is just kind of you wanting follow-up resources, then please just email through, and we can try and point you in the direction. But if it's specific questions with Thea, then yeah, please feel free to reach out. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming along and joining us on a Friday afternoon. And thank you so much, Thea. We really appreciate your time, and you know, hope to maintain our connection with you, and you know, hopefully we'll see you again.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. You know, even though this is a webinar, you know, again, that sense of community, that sense of actually talking about stuff that's real, you know, that's what really lights my fire. Like talking about things that are really real to us instead of all those everyday things that we focus on so much. So thanks very much.
Agreed, Thea, very, very much agreed. So thank you everyone. I hope everyone has a great rest of the day and a good weekend, and we will be in touch again shortly, and hope to see everyone for another webinar, which we haven't released details of yet, but will shortly for in a couple of months. So thanks so much, everyone.
Okay, see you.